All right, so I wanted to start off this lecture, and then we're going to do a little demonstration of advanced blocking, but I wanted to talk a little bit about breakdowns. And who best to talk about breakdowns but Richard Williams. So when we're breaking down our, it's not too hard to find the extreme keys, but how do you find those breakdowns and what do you do with those breakdowns? And I think the best way to think about it is the way to think about it as a 2D animator, especially when you're working from your imagination. So you could draw your key poses, but then the in-betweens or the breakdowns, which you might want to think as a straight in-between, but we're going to change it up a little bit. And that's why I want to talk about Richard Williams, the way he talks about it here. So in this straight example here, for instance, let's take a look at this finger opening up. So you have these two extremes in the black ink right here, and then it's opening up. So the computer might give this to you as a straight in between. It's completely, everything's sort of calculated halfway. There might even be some penetration into the floor if this is sitting on a bench or a table or something like that. So it's going to give you something that is directly linearly calculated halfway as an in-between. If you think about the breakdowns as something approximately halfway, but there's a little bit of a change in the way it's done. So it might be a little bit, in this case, it's sort of like you're dragging that last digit of your finger and then you're opening it up. So this could happen where the timing might be that it's really slow and then it snaps into this. And you can change the timing. Remember, the timing is sort of like the musical beats, right? So that could be where this could maybe go fast to this and then slow into this. So you can change it. So the breakdown is sort of that midway beat between the two beats right there. But if you can think about in-betweening or breaking down stuff, not just a simple computerized halfway thing. The computer can give you this very easily, but what you can do is let the computer give you this and then sort of mold it into this breakdown, okay? And you'll see this in real life examples as well. Nothing is really robotically, linearly moving from one key pose to the other. That's more of a robotic thing to do because it's the robot thinks more like a computer. But this is a much more organic way of looking at it. Same thing with when you're peeling off the foot, and in between by the computer might give you something like this where the toe never bends, but in reality, as you're peeling off, this heel rotation from here to here will probably end up over here, but with this, it's sort of the same thing, but what you're still getting is that bent toe, which gives you that sort of breakdown. Now, if you get the Richard Williams book, he goes into big detail on all of this, and he spends a lot of time on the breakdown, and I was fortunate enough to witness him give this whole lecture. This was back in the 90s when he came to the Warner Brothers studio when they had their feature animation department, and he was there for like a whole weekend or so. Or was it? No, it was actually during the week. So we took all the time off from production, and everybody who was an animator would attend his lecture, and he spent a lot of time on the breakdown and the ability of how the breakdown can really make your animation much more interesting. And he actually claims in the book that when he's sort of like on an automatic pilot, when he was doing a lot of commercials, that he would work out his key poses and then just kind of throw in a crazy breakdown to give it a little bit more interest without basically thinking too much about it. So here you have, like in a standard walk cycle, you could do a crazy passing position to change up a walk cycle and make it much more interesting. Here, let's see, he's talking a little bit about the breakdown, and he says here, a great way to get flexibility is is where we're going to place the breakdown drawing. And the breakdown drawing in a walk cycle would be considered the passing position, or it's the middle position, or the intermediate position, whatever you want to call it, between the two extremes. So where do we go in the middle? It's crucial. As we've seen with walks, it gives character to the move. It's a traveler, it's a transitional position. It's where we put it is so important. It's the secret of animation, I tell you. But he's a really big fan of that breakdown thing. And it's really one of the things that when he said that, it kind of opened up my eyes completely to animation and just changed everything, how I approached it. And it really, really made a big difference in my own animation. So I'm kind of passing that on to you just to really take that to heart and really, really think about it when you're animating. Just really put a lot of thought into that breakdown pose. Basically, you know, when you want to go from A to B, how is that middle breakdown pose going to be interesting? A little bit more interesting than just a straight linear interpretation. It goes on to say it stops things just going boringly from A to B. Go somewhere else that's interesting en route from A to B. Emery Hawkins, a master animator of change, said to me, Dick, don't go from A to B, go from A to X to B, go from A to G to B, go somewhere else but in the middle. Simple, powerful tool. I first got into this by working with Ken Harris when he'd cut up my drawings or bits of them and he'd stick them down in a different place. I ended up feeling so strongly about the breakdown that for years I went around ranting and raving that I could write a whole book about it. It just only took me, it just occurred to me that this is it. So I'm going to show you some examples of just like a simple head turn. If you have a character from smiling to sad, you could do something that's sort of straight as an in-between. It's okay, it works, but it's kind of dull. So then now he starts to give you all the different kinds of ways to do it. So let's say your breakdown is into just maybe something like this to that. And you can just try to feel it in your own face as you're trying to animate this in your head. And so there's plenty of examples. You could just kind of almost repeat what you just did here, and then the timing of it would be that it's sort of like a hold or a kind of a moving hold, and then it just snaps into the sad face, or you can go from the opposite of that, just go straight into the sad face, and you heavily favor it. You can sort of maybe change with the eyes. You can see there's always a different way of doing it. You can stretch the face here. You can rotate the head up a little bit. And then you can see all kinds. And it starts to get really super wacky with this idea of changing the breakdown from the smiley face to the sad face. You can tilt the mouth. You can change the eyes here. You can stretch the jaw. You can make a silly, crazy face over here. You can pucker the face here. And he's not done. He's still going more. So he goes even crazier with all these things. Now, of course, it depends on, you can't just have 2 frames here, 2 frames here, and 2 frames here. It would have to be a transitional thing. But you could just let the computer kind of interpolate between here and here, and then here and here. Now, this is maybe a little bit more useful when you think about it this way. If you have a simple head tilt, what you could do, now here, this is a straight in-between tilt, right? And that's very robotic. But if you can find something, even in your reference, if you see the 2 extremes, what's happening is there a little tilt in between that reference, between those 2 poses, okay? So in this case, he's leading more or less with the chin and then coming down. Or in this, he's leading more with the forehead and coming down, right? So it's still kind of halfway. This one is exactly halfway, but what you're doing is sort of like tilting it. So you can see that maybe the center, the pivot point center is in the middle. That's halfway, right? You got the pivot point here, and pivot point there. That's halfway. But what you're doing is you're just changing the angle of it. This simple overlap gives us action within an action, more change, more life. Okay, so it's basically what he's doing here. Again, going from here to here. sort of the same idea here, but you're changing angles. And then another example is from here to here. Now he's talking about, and this is what a lot of people do in cutout animation. If let's say you had two cutout poses right here, right? So what you could do is take the first cutout. Let's see, this one is, yeah, this one is not, this one is sort of in between halfway with the hat, but he's only rotating his head down first, and then he's going into that. But you see that what's going on here is that it's the same head. It's almost a copy. It is a copy actually of the first pose, and actually these two poses are pretty much the same head, except that they're just tilted. The only thing that's really changed is the neck and the body. But what he's done is just take that. It's almost like he copied the first pose and put it as a breakdown, and then he just kind of put it in a place roughly halfway, but not quite, if you know what I mean. So you can kind of do that in the same way when you're thinking in terms of your own animation. And if you try to find it in the reference, it's even better. And if you want to, you can even vary from the reference. If the reference is a little bit boring between A to B, maybe you can kind of switch it up a little bit and add something. So that's I just wanted to kind of talk about breakdowns in that regard.